On top of all of the physical layers is the software that allows the packets to flow between remote nodes. Sometimes this software will not function correctly, and packets will not be forwarded to a remote node. This malfunction may be due to an error in the routing software, a problem in the router's configuration, or, very rarely, an undiscovered problem in the routing protocol. A routing problem can manifest itself in a couple of ways. Everything seems up, but no packets are flowing between nodes. Or, the packets go the wrong way. How do you fix a routing problem? First, verify that all circuits are up and that all the routers are up and running. Another way to fix a routing problem is to use a program called traceroute. Traceroute uses the TTL field to determine the path to a destination. It shows the path a packet will follow on its path to a remote destination. A normal trace route would look like this. While a trace route that failed might look like this. Based on this result, you would look at the last router, in this case 192.68.143.3, and see if you can determine where the problem is. The problem might be on the next hop router, so you may want to look one hop past that node to ascertain the nature of the problem. Sometimes, due to a routing misconfiguration or a router software bug, a loop will develop for certain destination networks. A routing loop occurs when a pair of routers will each point next hops for a specific network towards the other router. A trace route with a loop will look like this. In this case, the trace route proceeds normally to 199.18.1.1, where it starts a loop with its upstream neighbor, 199.18.1.2. In this case, you need to refer to a network topology map to determine which router is having the routing problem. Sometimes, for a variety of reasons, a router will lose or forget a route to a remote destination network. One reason why this may occur is that the router is no longer hearing an advertisement for the route. This may be caused if the circuit at a remote site is down. The remote router's configuration has been changed so that it does not send an advertisement for that route anymore. The remote router is not functioning correctly and needs to be restarted. The router is not configured to accept routes from the remote router. One example might be that OSPF has not been configured on that interface. The router is hearing the advertisement for the route, but is not installing it in its routing table. The most likely culprit is either configuration or a software bug. If you find you are missing a route, then you need to start at the router where the information is imported into your network, then backtrack to see where the route is being dropped. Depending on the operational procedures at your NOC, you may be expected to track down part of the cause, or more commonly, escalate to a network engineer who will track the cause. Often networks have a default route which routes traffic to a backbone router. Sometimes, for a variety of reasons ranging from circuit failure to routing misconfiguration, your network may lose its default route. The repercussion of having no default route is that customer sites will be unreachable from the rest of the Internet. When you see that a router has lost a default route, for example, you have logged into the router and displayed its routing table and noticed that it had no default route, then you will need to initiate the repair procedure appropriate for your network, which might include calling an engineer. Occasionally, routers will route traffic into a black hole, where the information is never to be seen again. Often, this is evident when a ping does not respond, and a trace route runs to some point and then continuously times out. To detect the router with the problem, run a trace route and see where the timeouts are occurring. If the router where the timeouts occur belongs to you, then you should initiate repairs. If the router belongs to a site or to another network, you should notify them so they can fix the problem. Although most hardware design today will not experience component failure very often, failure does happen from time to time. Sometimes the failure just happens at random, and sometimes it is helped when lightning strikes, or the power company decides to send 220 volts instead of 120 volts of electricity. Hardware problems can be broken down into two types, total and partial. Total hardware failures occur when an entire node has failed. This often happens when a power supply or the central processor dies, rendering the entire unit no better than scrap plastic and chips. To start to debug the problem, you may want to determine if the node has electrical power. Does the fuse box have power? Are the lights lit? Is the fan running? Is the outage only on those items plugged into the same electrical outlet? If yes, then check for a tripped breaker. Environmental problems may cause downtime. Has the air conditioner or heater in the area caused the router to shut down? Was there a recent flood? What is the humidity and dampness of the environment in the room? Is the environment kept clean, relatively clear of dust? Often, dust can accumulate inside the unit and cause a clog or short circuit. If none of these seem to be a problem, then you will probably need to dispatch an engineer or a repair service to look at the node and see what has happened. Partial hardware failures are a failure mode where only part of a node has failed, but the rest of the node continues to function. An example of this might be that one serial port on a router fails, but the rest of the router continues to function. For partial failures, ask the following. Has just one or a few interfaces on the router failed? Try moving the connection to another port on the router. Install new equipment, for example, a CSU-DSU on the circuit. Try to loop the CSU-DSU hooked to the interface towards the router. If the interface fails to come up, then you know either the router port or the CSU-DSU is bad. You can isolate the problem by moving the connection to another port on the router. Are any interfaces up? With a partial hardware failure of one or a few ports, some things will remain functional on the router. If nothing is functioning correctly, then a serious hardware failure has occurred, and you will want to immediately send someone to look at the node. In some partial failure modes, the failure mode is not due to hardware but to software. If you log into the node and all the interfaces are up, but the router is not doing its normal job, then you will want to call someone to see if the node needs to be reset. Typically, this will be done by an engineer and not someone in the NOC. So, you're sitting and looking at your network monitoring station, and suddenly all the nice green boxes turn red, all at once. You have three options. Panic. Go home. Or try to solve the problem. You will need to determine the cause of the problem as quickly as possible. Initiate the fix, which might involve calling an engineer for a routing problem or calling a telephone company to get a circuit fixed. And last, verify that the problem is resolved. Start a troubleshooting procedure by determining the cause of the problem. Start with the most likely common cause. Has a circuit failed? Has a router failed? Has routing failed? Just taking a second to look at the map can tell you a lot. Is just one node down? Are all the end sites off of one common backbone router down? Does a site have a redundant connection to the network? And if so, are they still reachable via that connection? By answering these simple questions, you can start to understand how much of the network has failed and how much is still reachable. When you need to debug a problem, don't forget to use ping and traceroute to determine basic connectivity and routing problems. Also, use the router and CSU-DSU display information to determine circuit and/or routing problems. And always verify configurations. Sometimes a problem will occur which is very difficult to figure out. When you encounter these situations and don't know what to do, yell for help. Hey, John, can you come over here and help me?